Welcome to the Smith Publicity All Things Book Marketing Podcast, offering tips, insights, and advice from the best in the publishing industry. Hello, and welcome to this episode of All Things Book Marketing. I'm your host, Olivia McCoy, and our special guest today is Bookshop.org's Director of Bookstore Partnerships, Steph Opitz. Thank you so much for joining us, Steph.
Thanks for having me, Olivia. I'm excited to be here on the internet.
Us too. Love the internet. Love the connections this brought us in networking. I would love for you to start with telling us more about bookshop.org, what it is, and how it helps and affects authors, publishers, and booksellers.
So bookshop.org is an e-commerce space that helps independent bookstores compete against, I'm just going to say Amazon because we'll probably talk about Amazon a lot here today. But it's a way for them to be competitive on the online market. And we work with a bunch of different bookstores, over 2,000 throughout the country, but we also work with individuals, book influencers, affiliates of all kinds. So really just trying to help support authors selling their books online and getting people away from buying habits that are detrimental to the industry.
And what kind of buying habits would those be?
When people buy books from Amazon, that really negatively impacts the ecosystem of book publishing for a lot of reasons. There's a great book called How to Resist Amazon and Why by Danny Kane, who's an incredible hero bookseller, who I'm sure a lot of people like me evangelize, but it has a ton of pro tips in that book, and I would highly recommend it for anyone. But basically Amazon and other, I guess, big, I don't know, we can just say Amazon, are detrimental because they lowball book prices to get customers buying from their site, and it makes it hard for independent bookstores to be competitive with their prices, and then you lose the local businesses, and books aren't unique in that. That's just where I'm coming from, but that's what a big e-commerce retailer like that does to an industry, because they're selling so much and they're getting people for, who come in for a book but add all these other things. So they keep the price low on the books, and then it looks like we price our stuff, or we, being the independent book selling community, price our stuff too high, which in reality it's just what it costs.
Mm-hmm. And back a few years ago, maybe pre-COVID, a lot of publishers were saying, let's just do most of our focus on Amazon because that's where most of the books are going to be sold. And there was a belief maybe that indie bookstores were dying off or going away, especially with Borders closing and a bunch of other of those big retail chains closing. Barnes & Noble was suffering a little bit. But we actually saw kind of a change of events during COVID, and that's when bookshop.org came about. Can you tell us a little bit about that transition and where it's brought us to today?
Yeah, the great irony in my personal career is that I used to work for a place in New York called the Community of Literary Magazines and Presses, which is a wonderful organization for small presses and literary magazines. And when I was there, this is dating myself, we were really working with independent publishers on how to get their books onto Amazon, because Amazon was, as it is now, very difficult to navigate and talk to an actual person. And so we were trying to figure out best practices around indie publishers getting their books on something like that. And now my job is to course correct and take people off of it. But I guess right before COVID, our CEO and founder, Andy Hunter, realized that Amazon was, negatively impacting bookstores and making it hard for them, like I was saying. And so he thought about this concept of bookshop.org and sort of galvanizing all of these booksellers, and it would be impossible for one bookstore to compete, even like the Powell's of the country, not like Powell's stands alone, even like Powell's can't compete significantly against Amazon for a multitude of reasons. So if we all got together and combined forces, it would make a bigger impact on the industry as a whole. And Andy came up with this idea. Honestly, I don't know when he started, when he planted the seed for himself and started germinating on it, but he launched bookshop.org in January, I want to say, of 2020. And of course, the world shut down in March 2020. And a lot of like small businesses who couldn't compete online and didn't have people coming in their doors anymore were really in a precarious spot. So a lot of bookstores joined on to bookshop.org. They might not have had employees going into their stores at all, even if they were already a bookstore that was large enough to handle a warehouse and handle shipping. And so they used us to do that for them, which was serendipitous, I think, for all, because Bookshop was able to sort of fast forward testing its model and seeing, if it was something people wanted, which they did. And bookstores, this isn't me making this up. We hear from bookstores every time we physically walk into one or go to a conference that we kept them afloat at that time where their doors were closed, and that we were giving them a way to stay open, by virtue of being on the internet. And then we also give a profit pool to all the bookstores who work with us every 6 months. So if somebody comes onto our site organically, not through a bookstore, a percentage of that sale is going to a pool for all bookstores. And that gets split up every 6 months for all our affiliates. So if a bookstore uses us, and sorry if I'm like advancing the conversation faster than you're ready to go, but I've had caffeine.
No, go for it.
If a bookstore uses us, if they're an affiliate and somebody comes to, like, my local bookstore is Majors and Quinn in Minneapolis. If I went to Majors and Quinn's spot on bookshop.org and bought a book, Majors and Quinn would get 30% of that sale. Done and done. If I went onto bookshop.org and didn't select a bookstore, which we make it really hard for you to not select a bookstore. We want you to select a bookstore. But if I didn't, then a percentage of that sale would go to a pool that gets divided out. So any sale that's happening on bookshop.org is supporting independent bookstores, no matter which way you slice it. And it's a fun way to be able to, for example, when my sister-in-law, it's her birthday, I want to buy her a book from her local bookstore, but she lives in North Carolina. So I go online to bookshop.org. I go to the Flyleaf bookshop.org, and she's getting a book from her local through us. And it's a very sweet, kind of fun way to celebrate everyone's interests.
I've actually shopped at both of those bookstores you just mentioned, Majors and
amazing.
Quinn and Flyleaf. My family is in North Carolina, and I lived in Minneapolis for a stint during 2021. So that's
Amazing.
really random, but cool. I
Yeah.
remember in 2020, I went back to school and I got my master's in leadership for creative enterprises. So I was doing a lot of research and writing on the publishing industry. And it was right when bookshop.org got all of this in great press. And I was so excited and I got really into it. And I did a bunch of digging on y'all and did a bunch of like collection of all of the articles and everything. And I just remember seeing so much about how y'all kind of made indies cool again. Like they were always cool, but the readers kind of didn't know. They were like, oh, well, they're dying out, it's going away. And then all of a sudden, bookshop.org was like, no, no, no. We're going to keep going. COVID's not going to get us down. Amazon's not going to get us down. Like, let's band together. And then all of a sudden, you saw all of these really cool, creative things happening with online communities. You were seeing these independent bookstores doing new things, trying new things, and then succeeding. And instead of seeing Barnes and Noble even had a comeback. And I know they're a chain, so they're a little bit different and they're different than an indie bookstore, but even they were coming back and people just got really into reading again. Can you speak a little bit to why you think it caught on so quickly? Why you think that indies became cool and readers became interested again?
I mean, I think I'll push against that and say that indies were always cool and readers were
Always
always
cool.
reading.
Yes.
But I think that, it's hard to talk about everything happened with the pandemic with saying a silver lining. It feels crass, but I do feel like because people were home and they were largely building communities, like you said, on the internet and talking to each other on the internet, people were talking more about what they were reading. People were using books to approach difficult conversations. A lot of books were brought up around conversations around George Floyd's murder. People were using books to kind of feel connected, to have things to educate themselves, to talk about, to create, empathy or understanding. So it just became this time where I think people were listening maybe better about what other people are up to. Um, and I think that there wasn't to my knowledge, a great way, besides the American Booksellers Association, which is wonderful, for bookstores to feel really connected to each other, especially in this specific focus with the e-commerce conundrum. So having all of those things sort of dovetail, I think made it easier for bookshop.org to really come out swinging. And since our whole ethos is like shop indie first, like we're kind of your backup. Like if you can go to your local indie, do. If you can't, we're available to help you shop with them anyways. That I think made it possible for bookstores to feel like we were really representing their interests. And when we got lots of press, that's what we were talking about. We weren't talking about us per se. We were talking about these great companies and these communities and these people. I mean, I just think of booksellers as like almost therapists. People come into the store and they want like a book about this, a book about this, a book for this person in their family. And they kind of receive that information and come back with something that's, you know, really useful and impactful in a person's life. And so to be able to support that community, celebrate that community, and give them some energy where they were feeling probably very depleted by the difficulties of having closed doors, I think was just a really special unifying moment for everyone. And then a lot of bookstores that we work with were able to launch during the pandemic and have an online store while they raised funds to build an actual brick and mortar. Speaking of the Twin Cities, there's Black Garnet Books in St. Paul that started as a bookshop.org bookstore, and then a pop-up, and then now has an actual physical location in St. Paul. So we've loved being a part of success stories like that too, where people just either because it was the pandemic or because of financial constraints started with us and then have led to their ultimate goal.
And bookshop.org actually kind of spurred on this new wave of an independent response to Amazon and Amazon partnerships. For example, I'm thinking of Storygraph in response to Goodreads as an independent response. So Goodreads is actually owned by Amazon, for our listeners, watchers who don't know that. And so we saw when a lot of the community, the reader community and the publishing community, started talking more about how to support the indies and how to support independent authors as well, specifically. It also came about, well, how do we support readers who prefer the indies as well? Let's move out of Goodreads. Let's move on to Storygraph, or look at all these other apps and ways to connect and talk outside of the monopoly that Amazon was becoming. So I'd love to talk about we touched on it a little bit, but why is it important to support the indies? Why is it important to not have a monopoly in the book space?
I think that like if you asked a bunch of different people, they'd have a bunch of different answers to that. Something that I always think about when I'm talking about these conversations, there's my talk, is I think about my mom's book club. And the reason why I think about them is it's a group of fervent readers who are of a certain age and live in suburban communities. And I think about how I would talk to them about supporting independent bookstores and why it's important. And one of the arguments that I tend to make is that if people are shopping exclusively on Amazon and Amazon's cutting the prices for books, that means that publishers are they're making less money. Authors are making less money. That's just baseline. But then publishers, because they're not making as much money on these books, are lowering advances. And for those who don't know what an advance is, it's what an author gets to when their book is purchased by a publisher. It's like a sort of, I don't know, good faith gesture. You get money to say like your book is going to come out with them. And when advances are lowered, particularly with nonfiction books, it becomes a real problem because then folks aren't able to possibly, for financial reasons, spend as much time on the book. The publisher might not spend as much money on fact checking. The onus might be on the author to have hire an outside fact checker, and they're not getting enough money to do that. And then you see like a decline in the quality of books that are able to come out because of the people who are able to write books and have the resources to not be paid as much to write books. And so it's a real trickle down system where if you're buying books cheaply, you're going to create an industry in which they're cheaply written, for lack of a better phrase. And so that's kind of the way that I always try to talk about it, is like, buying independent not only supports community and that sort of thing, but it also really supports non-algorithmic, is that a word?
Yes.
Curation. It supports risk. It supports underserved communities. Booksellers are such advocates for pushing people outside of their box. You know, if you're like, I like to read historical fiction about World War II, which plenty of people do, a bookseller will know the wider breadth of works about that, and won't, if you've already read like the #1 bestseller on that topic, they'll be able to give you a deeper catalog and help you, maybe like say, okay, it looks like you've got World War II covered. What if you try like this or this or this, if you like historical fiction? And so it just gives a chance for more stories to be told, because there's more curators out there being able to help, and then more being able to write them.
A lot of our listeners and watchers are authors themselves, trying to learn about how to market their book, promote their book, different options available to them depending on their publishing pathways. So let's dive into what they can do to support the indies and to better support their own books and author platforms by using bookshop.org and really interacting with indie bookstores. My favorite piece of advice is that on your website, every author website should include all retail links, not just one, not just Amazon. Include bookshop.org, include Barnes and Noble, include Amazon if that's where you are seeing sales and putting marketing dollars towards, but also any independent bookstores in your community that you want to partner with for events, put their link on your website. Just give readers the option to buy from where they want to purchase from. Make it easy for them to make that choice, to make the decision, and not just take the easy route and go to wherever they're used to going. What are some other ways that authors and readers, but primarily authors, can support indie bookstores and indie readers?
Yeah, one thing that I go to a lot of writing conferences and book selling conferences. And one thing that I always find kind of funny is when a bookstore talks about when a local author wants to do an event at their bookstore, and they say, like, that's great. Have you ever shopped here? And the person has not. Like, that to me seems like a baseline, like, plan step #1, shop at your local indie, especially if you're an author, because they are your advocates. They love being able to talk about local authors. A lot of people who come into the stores are asking for local authors. So be a friend, and not just like a person who asks for things, but a person who participates in that community, I think is kind of low hanging fruit. Um, for authors using our site, so there's kind of a divide in the industry of what people mean when they say indie. So for some people, as indie authors, they mean that they're published by an independent publisher, like a small press. And some people mean that they are self-published. The distinction is complicated. I hate it. I wish that there was 2 different words for it, but there's not. So I think that I'll first talk about self-published authors. We are in the process right now of launching ebooks, and I know that a lot of self-published, yes, it's coming this summer. I don't think I can like officially say a date, but stay tuned. We're
It's
in beta
been
right now.
it's been teased on threads quite a bit.
Yes. So it's not a secret that we're doing it, or the date. I just don't think I can speak to it with authority. But there are a lot of self-published authors, I think, who feel limited in that, I can't even remember what Amazon's self-publishing thing is called, Amazon Spark, or something. No, maybe that's
Ingram
Ingram Spark.
Spark and KDP.
Thank you. So I think they've felt limited by that option. And so we're going to be working with Ingram Spark and Draft to Digital and other really great services for independent authors so that their ebooks can be available on our site. And that will be well explained on our site for authors who are looking to publish that way and to be available. And we're really excited about it. And that helps bookstores, because then, you know, a bookstore is limited to its physical space, but with the ebook, it's like their store shelves can be infinite. With anyone, so this is for both types of indie author, you could be an affiliate on our site. Anyone can be an affiliate. I'm an affiliate. And what that means is that you sign up for an account, and you personally get 10% of every sale from a book on your page. And 10% still goes to independent bookstores. So you're still supporting independent bookstores, but you're also doing the thing that I think is so hard for so many writers, making a little extra money on your work. This doesn't impact your royalties. This is just something that you can do like a vendor. And so you can go to our about section and go to how to become an affiliate, fill it out. And we just a real person, because we're not robots. We're all real people at bookshop.org, our very sweet small company. We will check to make sure that you're a person and not a bot. And then we will approve your affiliate status. And then you can create a page and you can have like your books. You can a list of your books. You can have a list. I don't write. So my lists are like, here's what I read last year. Here's some cookbooks I really like. Here's what my kids are reading, those different things. And what I personally do is just include a link to books from my page on my email signature. Or if somebody is like, what should my book club read? I'm like, here's my page for recommendations. If you want any like more details, just let me know. And that way, like like anyone could just make a little bit of money doing that. And it's kind of fun to be able to curate your own page and be able to share your own links. So if you're an author and you have a website and you want to share your book from bookshop.org, you could share your specific hyperlink. So not only are you supporting indies, you're supporting your own career, and it's a win-win.
That's epic. I need to go have a meeting with our CEO about it. I'm gonna go check it out too in my own free time.
Yes.
And then Danny Kane, huge resource, how to resist Amazon and why, as well as how to protect indie bookstores and why. Both excellent reads, highly recommend for anyone looking to learn more about the background of this whole space and indie publishing and how to be involved in very actionable ways. And sometimes it doesn't have to be as huge as starting a grassroots movement. It can literally just be buying a book here. When you do share your pre-order link on your social media with your audience, you're sharing the bookshop.org link or the indie bookstore link as opposed to an Amazon link. Little things like that go a long way. And I've actually seen a lot of publishers move towards promoting bookshop.org as their main retailer as opposed to Amazon, which is really cool to me because it feels I don't think it's new. It's been around forever. Indie publishers love indie bookstores and they're very much hand in hand together. But being able to have that extra option to make it really easy to support the indies is so nice. Do you have any other recommendations for resources for anyone to look up, or blogs, newsletters, specific people they can connect with on social media that you think would be a good use of their time?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a little cheap to say it, but the person who runs our social media is incredible. Her name's Kayla. She's on Threads and she's on all the things. I personally don't use all of them, but she does. And she just is constantly sharing great information about why supporting indies, things about like Independent Bookstore Day coming up, all these different sort of ways that you can use us or just use independent bookstores. And one thing that I was thinking about, you were asking that question, is when people are like, oh, Amazon's just so much faster. And I'm like, first of all, we're almost the same, if not maybe a day behind, but also, do you need a book? Is it like an emergency? Like if you're ordering it online and you need it tomorrow, like that's on you. Like I don't know. It feels like they're not book emergencies. I get it when people are like, oh, this book has like a special cover and the first, however many people, but usually that's through an independent bookstore as well. So when people are like, well, Amazon's faster, it's like, why do you need a book that fast? Like have a couple more on hand. I don't know a single avid reader that doesn't have a to be read pile that's massive and can like wait a second. Like I have books on my Libby, on my Libro, on my shelf. Like I have so many things ready to go. I'm never in a book emergency where I'm like, oh, I have to go on Amazon. So I just think about that a lot. Like, why don't you just, take a breath, think about that. I think that's sort of
It's
best resources to search within yourself for the answer.
it's funny. I never have I have to have this book right now emergencies, but I do have what feels like pre-order emergencies. Like the second
Mhm.
I see like a book is coming down the pipeline, like, oh, it's coming out in 2025. I'm like, I have to pre-order it right now before I forget it's got to come. And then I end up pre-ordering it like 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, great, everyone gets a book. You get a good book. You get a book. You get a book. And then I have all the different editions. And so maybe that says more about me, but in a
No,
fun
I'm the
way.
same way with pre-orders, and I love it. And I feel like that's one of the I'm sure you've probably talked with people about this, or we'll talk about it with your next guest. But I think that pre-order is such an incredible way to support an author. It shows the publisher and bookstores that there's confidence, that there's an audience, that this is like happening, and then more books are printed and more are available, and the author goes on maybe a bigger tour to your city. And it really, like, pre-orders, I feel like not enough of the public knows how important that act is. So yeah, if you're really excited about it, order one, forget, order 10 more, forget.
Yes. And bookshop.org does make it really easy to pre-order. I find that books are usually available for pre-order on Bookshop maybe faster than they are at my local independent bookstore. And that's just because they have to wait till it's fully in their system from Ingram. Y'all tend to have that page up at the exact same time that Amazon does for pre-order. So there's no question. It's super easy to log in. My account auto logs in, so it recognizes me on all my devices, and then it's click, done. And then I never look at it again until it shows up. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot of the same book, but that's cool. Into it, totally into it.
I love it.
How
Yeah,
can,
we really try to make that easy. So I'm glad that you found that.
yes, absolutely. How can our listeners and watchers get in touch to learn more about bookshop.org?
I think we have like a bunch. I mean, like I said, we're on every social media. There's just a general info at bookshop.org. There's so many people at our company that are just ready to be helpful. And that's something that I always want to stress, is that if you email info@bookshop.org, it's not going into a void. We're just, it's getting passed to the right person, and you will hear from a human, and we're just really trying to be helpful. And that's where all sort of this company comes from.
I know Kayla is on top of answering comments on social media and posting, and I'm sure DMs as well. I have connected with several people from bookshop.org. Dan, top of mind, just connected
Oh
with
yeah,
him
because
about
he's been on the
something.
podcast. Yeah.
Yep. Oh yeah. Love Dan. Dan's a great person. And then couple other people and whose names are eluding me right now, but everyone has been so fantastic, so nice. So if you do have any questions or want to learn more, I highly recommend it. And Steph, thank you so much for joining us and spending time talking indies with me. I love it.
Yeah, it's my favorite topic. So thank you.
Of course. And listeners, watchers, if you like this episode, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with anyone else that might be interested. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Smith Publicity All Things Book Marketing Podcast. To reach us and learn about our many services, visit smithpublicity.com or send us an email to info@smithpublicity.com.